Hi, welcome to Physics Teacher. In this video, I'm going to go over a lab that I do with my grade 12 physics students on impulse and momentum. So it's going to consist of a few parts. If you'd like to follow along, you can download the handout, which is available for free in the description. And I will go over every step and give you the data you need to make your own analysis. Alright, so what we're doing is I have a track with 3 carts, so there's very little friction. We're going to ignore friction. Here I have a force sensor, here I have a motion sensor. The motion sensor is going to collect the data about the velocity of the cart. Then I have 3 cars. This one has a spring bumper. This one also has a spring bumper, but it's a little bit more rigid. This one has no bumper at all. We're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to compare using the first spring bumper, impulse and change in momentum. Then, we are going to look at all 3 carts and look at the difference between the forces that act on them over the time that acts on them. Now, all these carts have identical masses. They have a mass of 260 grams, every single one of them. So mass is going to be staying constant for this experiment as one of our controls. All right, let's start with our first trial. So here we can see the change in velocity. So let's look what the velocity was before and after the collision. Alright, so we can see that before the collision, we had a velocity of negative 0.3584 meters per second. And after the collision, we have a velocity of positive, again, the signs are different because they move in different directions, positive 0.3373 meters per second. Now the area under our force time graph right here tells us the impulse. So we can analyze that impulse. It's called an integral to figure out the area underneath, and we get an impulse of 0.1876 Newton seconds. Okay, let's do a couple more trials. So in this second case, it looks like our impulse is 0.1919 Newton seconds. Before the collision, it had a velocity of negative 0.3640 meters per second. And after, positive 0.3412 meters per second. Let's do it one more time, and I'll try to push it a little bit faster. Alright, so let's try our change in velocity. We went from negative 0.615 meters per second to positive 0.5771. And our impulse, 0.3234 Newton seconds. Alright, so we're going to do this again. But we're going to try it with the stiffer spring. And I want you to notice a couple things. One, you can test to make sure impulse and change in momentum are equal to each other, because that's the purpose of this lab. But I also want you to see how the force is changing and how the time is changing for that collision. Alright, so notice the value of the force here. Right? It's much greater than before. And the time looks a little bit less. Let's look at our impulse. So 0.1984. And so our impulse is 0.2222 Newton seconds. Wow. Okay. And our change in velocity, we started at negative 0.4214 meters per second and ended at 0.4023 meters per second. I'll do it again, but I'll try to throw it a little faster, like last time. No? All right, our change in velocity, negative 0.6908 meters per second to positive 0.6643 meters per second. And our impulse, 0.3660 Newton seconds. All right, now we're going to move on, and we're going to try the cart with no spring bumper at all. Look at the difference in that amount of force. So much more force, and it's acted on over a very small time period. So let's check the impulse. We get 0.2891 Newton seconds with a change in velocity of initially negative 0.6560 meters per second, and finally 0.4252 meters per second. All right, I'll do that one more time, just to make sure our results are consistent. Let me do it a little bit more slowly this time. Even on such a slow speed, we have a huge spike in our force time graph. Let's check the impulse. 0.1575 Newton seconds, and we will check our change in velocity. We started at minus 0.3465 meters per second and ended at 0.2305 meters per second. So I hope you found this lab interesting, and if you like, go ahead, get that handout for free in the description, do your own analysis. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And for all sorts of labs and other types of videos related to science and math in high school, go check out my channel and all the playlists I have available, and make sure to subscribe to help support more videos. Thank you.